You're here, Jake?
You had more questions for me about Jessica's disappearance.
We found the body, Jake.
You what? You found her body? What happened?
The camera body, Jake! It's all over now!
That proves nothing.
What about this, Jake? I bet we'll find something out here that'll prove otherwise! You know what I think? I think you had enough of taking her Instagram photos. I think you snapped. What was it with, Jake? A 9mm? A 50mm?
I could never.
Stay focused, Jake! I think you took her out back, and you shot her, and you shot her again, and again! Starting to get the picture!
All right, I did it. I shot her.
Book it.
And then I took her and I put her in the back of my car.
Excuse me?
And then I went to the store and I took a bunch of bricks. And then I took her body and those bricks and I put them in a bag.
Buddy. This is a sketch. This is a sketch. You wrote it, the script. It's camera puns with the camera body and the snapped and the photos.
And then I put
It's a sketch.
that bag
It's a
into
story.
the river.
It's a sketch for a video.
You know what, detective? I did it. I killed her.
It's not worth it, buddy. It's not. Do you know how long it's gonna take to find another editor?
And I'd do it again, too. I did it! I'd do it again, too! I'd do it again! I'd do it again!
This is quite the development.
And our comic relief for the day. Ooh, jeez. Sparkling lime flavored water from the local mire. Hi, I'm Nick Mayo, and welcome to the third video in the photography series of Enough to be Dangerous. This episode, we're talking about composition. Now, what is composition? Simply, it's the way you arrange your objects within your frame to form your picture. There are a lot of connections between how an artist creates a painting and how the photographer composes a picture. Both use similar techniques. For the photographer, it's a matter of finding the right arrangement and capturing it. You can do this by using different lenses, changing your perspective, or simply moving objects in and out of your frame. All in all, if you follow these techniques, you'll be able to compose your photos in a visually interesting way. You'll also find that these techniques are helpful for video. We'll actually be using a few frames from the intro video to illustrate some of them when applicable. But before we go any further, I would like to clarify that these rules are not immovable.
The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
You don't always have to use these rules, but before you go breaking them, you should know what they are. And I should warn you, we're going to be going through these pretty quickly, so make sure you're ready. All right, let's get into it. 10 composition techniques to improve your photos. Number 1, rule of thirds. On your frame, imagine 2 vertical and 2 horizontal lines that separate your image into 9 equally shaped panels. Where these lines intersect are generally where you want to place your subjects. We demonstrate this a lot in our opening sketch. Almost every shot has an important element landing on one of these thirds. Mostly it's the left and the right third, but you can use the other thirds as well. Often you can use the upper and the lower third when taking photos that include the horizon. As long as the objects of interest are falling on one of these intersection points, you are following the rule of thirds. But it does make you wonder, how did we come up with this rule? That brings us to number 2, the golden ratio. Also called the golden mean, the golden ratio occurs naturally. It's actually kind of spooky how frequently it shows up. It's possible that's a design element so prevalent in our everyday lives that we just find it naturally aesthetically pleasing. When we see it in photographs, it feels natural. Now, the golden ratio is essentially a mathematically more complicated version of the rule of thirds. Ready? This is straight from Wikipedia. 2 quantities are in the golden ratio if their ratio is the same as the ratio of their sum to the larger of the 2 quantities. In other words, when you break it down, it's 1.61803398875. I bet you thought that was pretty impressive. I had it memorized. Don't be fooled. I'm using a teleprompter. This number can be used to calculate where your grid should land on your frame. But honestly, it's a little difficult to use when you're running around taking photos really fast at an event. Nonetheless, you should remember it because I guarantee it's gonna come up again in a future video. Number 3, symmetry. So far we've been lining up our subjects on the thirds, but you can put your subject in the middle of your frame as well. Sometimes portraits are done this way. The subject will look right into the camera. However, it's important to note that this type of framing communicates something very specific. When your subject's looking right into the camera, it's communicating a type of intimacy between the viewer and the subject. Even right now, I'm centered in frame, looking right into the camera. We do this because we want you to feel like we're talking with you. But symmetry isn't only used for taking portraits. You can find symmetry in the reflection of a cup on a table, of a tree on a lake. You can find symmetry in the architecture of a building or on a leaf. You won't always be able to find symmetry at the events you shoot, but when you do, it can be a unique way to tell your story. Number 4, depth. A way to bring some life into your image is to create the illusion of depth. By their nature, a photo is a 2D representation of a 3-dimensional moment in time. We can make our images more lifelike by mimicking how our eyes perceive the world around us. As I mentioned in the exposure triangle video, your eyes don't see everything in focus all at once. Usually only what you're looking at remains in focus. We'll call this area in focus the middle ground. Everything behind it is the background and everything in front of it is the foreground. Including all 3 elements in your photos help to create the illusion of depth and make your photos more lifelike. We did this a lot in our video by including the opposite character in the foreground of each frame. We're also able to do this by using what we learned in a previous episode about aperture. We kept our aperture low to create a shallow depth of field. Using your aperture to create a shallow depth of field is a great way to make the illusion of depth in your image. And it's a great way to do our next technique. Number 5, isolate the subject. When I say isolate the subject, what I mean is I want you to be able to separate the main focus of your photo from the rest of the image. Make it so my eyes go right to the subject. Use simple, non-distracting backgrounds. Like we did in the video, use your knowledge of aperture to blur out the background and the foreground, drawing your eye to the subject. You can also use light to do this. In our video, the light is positioned in a way to illuminate only the subject in any given frame. You can also use color to isolate your subject and bring attention to it, which brings us to our next point. Number 6, color. Along with using color to isolate your subject, color can be used to direct the eye around an image. This can be most effective when you use contrasting colors. Also, look for opportunities to use different colored light to separate your subjects from the background. Use a warm key light, but a cool backlight. Also, you can use repeating colors to help lead your eye around a frame. Consider it like the yellow brick road. Your eye will travel down a path of similar colors. However, using repeating images is not only reserved for colors only. Number 7, leading lines. Similar to using repeating colors to create a pathway, the photographer can use leading lines to direct the eye as well. This can be something as simple as using the edges of a path to direct your attention, or it can be patterns and textures as well, as long as these elements act as directional signs that point towards the subject. Patterns and textures are great. The human brain does an amazing job of picking up these things every day, and it can be an effective way to draw the viewer's attention right to your subject. When you're shooting at an event, keep this in mind. You might be able to find something like bricks on the ground or a fence that can be used as a way to draw your attention to your subject. Number 8, frame within a frame. It's not bad practice to frame your subject within a frame in your image. In fact, it's personally one of my favorite ways to draw attention to my subjects. You can use windows, arches, trees, objects in the foreground, almost anything as long as it creates a frame around your subject. This is actually an old technique that was used in the Renaissance to help create depth in their images. And it's a technique that takes a lot of time to perfect, but when you do, it can really make your images come to life. Number 9, negative space. Proper use of negative space is another way to draw attention to your subject. Simply, it's the space around your main subject in your photo. You can leverage negative space to your advantage in photos where your subject is relatively small in size. The smaller the main subject is in relation to the negative space around it, the more attention it should draw. We've used negative space in the past to help balance our images of our pastor preaching. Giving him a lot of space in front of him in the direction he's looking helps create the idea that he's looking towards something. It communicates openness, and it gives us room to later fill in that space with text when we create our notable quotables. Number 10, angels. Angels. I think I made a typo on the teleprompter.
Want an angle?
Want an angle?
Number 10, angles. Where you position your camera in relation to your subject will communicate different feelings. Placing your camera at a high angle above your subject can make the subject look small and cute and innocent. A low angle, on the other hand, can make your subject look tall and powerful. We did this in our video. When Caleb's character started getting the upper hand over my character, we filmed him at a low angle and myself at a high angle. We were trying to subconsciously communicate to you who had the power in that situation. As my character became more, crazy, we shot him from a low angle and tilted the camera. The tilted camera technique is called a Dutch angle. Having a tilted image communicates something is not level. In this case, we made my character look a little twisted when compared to the shots of Caleb. This angle can also be used to illustrate excitement or fun. I use this technique a lot when I'm shooting events that include a lot of excitement. Having it just a little bit tilted kind of helps communicate that we're so much fun in this room that we can't stay level. All right, that's it. 10 techniques to help compose your photos. I should note that there are a lot of other techniques that I omitted in this video, but this isn't an exhaustive list. If you really want to continue learning different ways to compose photos, I would recommend go study the painters of old. Some of the techniques we discussed today were born during the Renaissance. Studying how painters chose to arrange their images can give you a great idea how to arrange yours as well. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Blackbar. Don't forget to listen to our podcast where we go more in depth about topics we discussed in the videos and our own personal stories. Join our Discord and connect with us and a community of creators who are ready and willing to help answer questions you might have. Like and subscribe for more content, and we'll see you in the next episode.